Guys, welcome to the J. Scott Outdoors podcast. Today is going to be a great episode with Heather Kelly of Heather's Choice, and we're going to learn a lot about backpacking meals. And Heather has an extensive background in collegiate athletics, which has led her to discovering how to best dehydrate food. And I've tried a bunch of her products, and they're really good. The packaging's awesome. I think you're going to get a lot out of this episode. Before we get to the episode, I'd like to announce a couple things. We've got a free trial promo going with GoHunt.com Insider. You'll have a 30-day free trial exclusive just for the J. Scott podcast listeners. If you've heard about GoHunt Insider, if you haven't heard about them, then you need to go check them out. It's a 30-day free trial. One of the unbelievable things about GoHunt Insider is the Filtering 2.0 system, which allows you to search all of the draw odds of the western states, the harvest statistics, and get down to the nitty-gritty of all of the details involved in the western states. And also you get application strategies, and being a part of a GoHunt Insider, every month they give away hunts, they give away great hunting gear, Kuyu backpacks, Kuyu tents. They gave away a mule deer hunt, an antelope hunt, an elk hunt, a Dall sheep hunt, and this is your opportunity for a free 30-day trial. All you have to do is go to gohunt.com/JScott, all one word, and click on the blue free trial button. Go through the steps. It only takes about 2 minutes. You'll be required to give a credit card, but you will not be charged until after the free 30 days. You can cancel any time within the first 30 days to prevent being charged. If you have any questions at all, you can also email freetrial@gohunt.com, and someone from the GoHunt team will promptly respond and take care of your needs. Guys, this is a great opportunity for free to go in and see what the GoHunt Insider is all about. I use it on applying for all the western states, and there's already been a bunch of people that have taken advantage of this free trial, so I encourage you to do so. Also encourage you to once you get on there, you're gonna love it, and you're gonna realize that it's an unbelievable resource for anybody that's applying in western states. I want to thank GoHunt.com Insider for their title sponsorship of this podcast. Another promotion that we're offering is with another one of our sponsors, Western Hunter and Elk Hunter Magazine. And the new cool promotion that we're doing with them is that if you subscribe today, you can get the newly released fall issue of the Elk Hunter Magazine totally free and delivered to your door. This particular issue has an extensive article from Corey Jacobson, the world champion elk caller, on the anatomy of elk, complete with detailed photographs and diagrams. This is the most complete article ever written on the subject and is a must-read for any elk hunter. Also, Colton Bagnoli introduces hunters to the use of suppressors and why hunters would want to own one. Also, How to Be an Elk Guide by Remy Warren, as he breaks down the do's and don'ts of how to get started. And Darren Cooper explains the result of his arrow fletching test and field tips and broadheads. You can go to westernhunter.net and subscribe to Western Hunter, Elk Hunter, or the best value then is to subscribe for both. When you check out, just plug in the discount code JSCOTT, all one word, and your free issue will be on its way. Guys, I want to thank all of you guys, my listeners, for all of your support. I also want to encourage you to send me emails. I get emails every day from listeners at jscottoutdoors@gmail.com. I try and respond as quickly as I can, usually within an hour or so. I also am going to be featuring on this podcast. I'm going to be answering a bunch of these questions, and I just really appreciate the feedback, the support, and all the interaction with each one of my listeners. Up here in Colorado for the summer, I actually was fortunate last week to go to lunch on 2 different days with 2 different listeners of the J. Scott Outdoors podcast who who looked me up through Instagram and said, let's get together for lunch. And I just really enjoy that personal feedback from each one of you guys, the listeners, and I value each and every one of you. So I just want to thank you for your support. This is going to be a great episode with Heather Kelly. You guys are going to learn a lot, and I want to hear from you. I want to hear how you guys like this episode, so feel free to shoot me a text or an email or an Instagram message or a Facebook message. That brings me to my next point. We have revamped the J. Scott Outdoors business page on Facebook. If you haven't, go over there, give us a like. And check it out. Have had several elk videos on that page that have had over 1 million views in a matter of days. I think we had 6 or 7 million on our reach last week alone. So great things going on over there. Also in the process of revamping my website. Now you can just go to one central location. That's jscottoutdoors.com. You can send me an email through there. You can get my telephone number. You can get links to my Instagram, my YouTube, and my Facebook. And it's a great way to connect there. And that website's going to be continuing to get better every day, and more content's going to be added there. So, guys, again, thanks for your support. Let's get right to this episode with Heather Kelly. Welcome to the J. Scott Outdoors podcast. Today we've got a special episode with Heather Kelly. Heather has Heather's Choice backpacking meals, and I've had the fortune of ordering the sampler pack and basically got almost everything you make, I think, Heather, and I've been trying it over the last week, and my wife and I have been really enjoying it. How you doing, Heather?
Oh, doing great. Just enjoying Alaska and kind of gearing up for my next big adventure.
That's awesome. Yeah, I want to talk to you all about that. What part of Alaska have I caught you in today?
Today I'm in Anchorage and just drove in from our place out in Bird Creek, which is about 25 miles south of Anchorage.
Gotcha. And how long have you lived in Alaska?
Born and raised. I left for college to go to school in Bellingham and spent some good time in Colorado for a bit, but ultimately got so damn homesick I had to move back to Alaska because summers in Alaska are impossible to beat in my mind.
Yeah, I haven't made it up to Alaska yet, but I have a lot of friends that have, and it's sure, as much as my wife and I like spending our time here in Colorado, I imagine Alaska has a lot of similarities, but probably with a lot less people.
Yeah, I think we're creeping up on 500,000 people here in Anchorage, which is, half the population of Alaska. So it's always really humbling how you can leave Anchorage and even just walk out your back door. And like we went on a big hike Saturday and we were on the trail for 16 miles and didn't see another person the whole way. So we have that liberty.
That's awesome. That's incredible. I've got a couple questions for you. Growing up in Alaska, did you grow up out in the bush, or were you near Anchorage?
Near Anchorage. So this place where we live now, Bird Creek, is actually where my dad was born and raised as well. It's kind of a cool story. My grandparents came up in the 1950s, and my grandpa was up here for a year working for the military, helping build, I think, the Air Force Base. And he was here for a year, fell in love with it, went back to St. Louis and scooped up my grandma and said, "We're moving to Alaska, honey." And
Wow.
they did some of the very last homesteading in Bird Creek. I think they bought 5 acres for $250 and built this log cabin where they didn't have running water or electricity for, I think, the first 10 years of my dad's life or something like that. And yeah, my dad helped kind of finish the house and has never left. So we now have this beautiful piece of property right up against the Chugach National Forest. So our backyard is pretty infinite. So we get grizzly bears and we get silver salmon running up the stream near us, and it's pretty much an oasis.
That's awesome. And so growing up there, you obviously were into hiking, and tell me all the things you did as a kid growing up.
Sure. I wasn't a super athletic kid. I actually, when I left for college, I thought I was going to get into photography. So I can't say that I necessarily grew up backpacking and camping, but definitely grew up with a really strong food culture. My mom's kind of the ultimate foodie, and I always joke that she would be really upset if she knew I ever ate a non-organic apple. So I spent a lot of time with my mom just picking berries, and we would go fishing all the time, and we'd spend a lot of Saturdays at the farmer's market. And so that was always really awesome to always know that I was eating super healthy, good food. And she kind of groomed me to be a little bit of a food snob, I guess.
Well, and that's a lot of your background in what's brought you to creating these awesome meals. Before we get to that, as you transitioned into college, you are a two-time NCAA national champion in rowing, and I'd like to get how you first started rowing and when you knew that you would be pretty good at your trade.
Sure. So when I was 18, I was recruited to start raft guiding up here in Alaska. And my good friend Allison and I basically just signed up to start rowing boats for this company, Chugach Adventure Guides, down in Girdwood. And neither one of us had ever rowed a boat before. And so I remember my first summer of raft guiding was filled with tears and screw ups and flipped boats. And it was definitely a steep learning curve. But that summer, I was headed off to college in the fall, and I had a gentleman who was a client that rowed my boat, and he took one look at me and said, "You need to go out for crew when you get to college." And I didn't even know what crew was, and kind of blew it off. But then when I got to Western Washington University, I found out that Western actually had a really competitive rowing team. And so I showed up for the first practice at 5 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday and just immediately fell in love with it, because you're out on the water. It's still dark. You have stars overhead. Sometimes you have a little bit of fog on the lake. And it is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. If anybody has ever sat down on an erg or a rowing machine and pulled 2,000 meters for time, you likely know how difficult it is. And so I just got completely hooked and stuck with it all 4 years. And I was just shy of going to nationals my freshman year. I went as an alternate, my sophomore year, and then finally made the varsity 8 my junior and senior year, and kept my seat through 2 national championships. So that was actually our 5th and 6th consecutive national championship as a team.
That's fantastic. So, educate me. I row a fly fishing raft, but I don't know much about competitive rowing. Educate us on, obviously it's a team game. How many people in a boat? And tell me a little bit about that.
Sure. Crew is pretty unique. I think it's actually the oldest collegiate sport, and you have all different types of boats. You have singles, you have doubles and pairs. So you might have 2 people with 2 oars or 2 people with 1 oar. And then you have quads or 4s, where again, people have 2 or single oars. Usually in those 4-person boats is when you start to see you're also adding a coxswain. So you're maybe adding a 5th person to that boat. And then,
which is the person that steers the boat?
Yep, they steer, and they're kind of the brains behind the whole operation. Coxswains don't get enough credit for what they do, because not only are they steering, but they're also talking to you throughout the entire race and kind of helping you to execute your race plan. And they're telling you where you are on other crews and where you are in the course. Because in a racing shell, like let's say the 8-woman boat that I was in, your feet are in these shoes that are strapped to a flat board, and then your seat slides back and forth. And so you're kind of stationary in this boat with where your feet are, and then you just move your butt back and forth. But since you're facing the stern, you can't see what's coming. All you see is the girl in front of you or the coxswain in front of you, and you are literally just a cog in the wheel doing what you're told. So It's pretty unique. And like I say, 2,000 meters is typically the distance that we run, and that would take anywhere from 6 to 7 minutes. Otherwise, if you were doing longer races, somewhere closer to 5,000 meters, it would take substantially longer and hurt substantially more. So.
What kind of training? I mean, it sounds like you went from being a raft guide for a summer and then diving into, college athletics. What kind of training did you guys go through in those 4 years at Western Washington?
It was definitely heavy on the training. I think I was spending close to 24 hours a week training during college. So I feel like I mostly went to school to row. And typically we would get up at 4:15 and drive out to the lake, and we would start practice at 5 and get off the water somewhere around 7 a.m., get back, shower, go to class. And then we always had afternoon workouts that ranged from really long cardio sessions to strength training to getting back out on the water. It was pretty wide ranging. And I was fortunate enough to keep my raft guiding job in the summer months. So I was training for crew all summer and spending long days out on the water. So it worked out to be a pretty good deal that I sort of had this cross training that I was getting paid for.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And what kind of raft in the summer were you mainly rowing? And how big of a raft?
We were typically in 18-foot airs with stern mount frames, so that was nice to just be in the back of the boat, oaring people around. I spent one summer in Colorado paddle guiding, and I actually really didn't like it because, for people who don't know, oaring, you have your 2 oars and you're kind of steering and you've got full control of the boat. Whereas paddle guiding, you have all your passengers with paddles, and then you're in the back kind of steering the boat with your paddle. And it's just a totally different animal. I know people love paddle guiding boats, but I couldn't stand it because I was so dependent on all of my passengers to get me downriver. So I ultimately ended up going back to oar boating.
Yeah, it makes total sense. As someone, I've been rowing my raft with the oar frames and the whole setup since 2010, and I can't imagine going down some of the rapids and knowing that the only thing you can do is steer, and that when you need them to propel you, they may or may not follow directions. I know in some of the dicey situations that I've rowed in, it's nice. I actually almost have a calmness because I feel pretty well in control, and I just can't imagine if I was just steering and didn't have the ability to really control the situation.
Yeah, it's definitely humbling. So it's always fun to get out on the water, though, and like you say, get in the sticks and scare yourself a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. And so your junior and senior year, you were a part of the national championship team. Where were the champions or the championship? Where did it take place? Where did nationals or whatever take place?
They tend to switch it between the East and the West Coast. My first year going to nationals, we were in Camden, New Jersey, which is not the most beautiful place I've ever been, but definitely an incredible trip and one I'll never forget. And then the following year, we were in Sacramento on the American River.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Well, that's fantastic. And after rowing collegiately and at a high level, did it take you a few years after that to, you get real competitive, and if you have to kind of turn that off, was that a little bit of a transition for you?
Yeah, I don't think that I've successfully made that transition yet. Immediately after college, I went and got hooked up with a group of folks who were headed to go raft the Colorado River, which is kind of where my Heather's Choice journey started. And so I went down and spent a month on the Colorado for the month of December through January, and was oaring boats down there on really big water and just, once again, getting scared out of my mind. But
That's the biggest of the big right there.
it's pretty big water, that's for sure. And so when I was on that river trip, somebody had mentioned, oh, you should go guide on the Poudre River outside Fort Collins. And so I took a leap of faith and drove my truck from Anchorage to Haines, caught the ferry down to Bellingham, drove out to Colorado, and I didn't have a job when I left and didn't get hired on until about May. And I immediately joined a CrossFit gym down there and totally drank the Kool-Aid on that and got super competitive with CrossFit for quite a few years. So that was kind of my transition, I guess.
Yeah, that CrossFit will do that for sure. Let's take a quick break here. Have you guys heard about PhoneScope? PhoneScope is a privately held company that makes custom molded, precisely engineered smartphone digiscoping adapters. Photographing wildlife has never been easier. Take digiscoping photos and videos from your smartphone and share them with your friends. PhoneScope stands behind their product with a 100% money-back guarantee. PhoneScope is the future of digiscoping. Get yours now. Use the JScott16 promo code and receive 10% discount on all purchases. Check them out at PhoneScope, that's PhoneSkope.com, or on Instagram at PhoneScope. Wilderness Athlete is committed to improving the health and quality of life for the outdoor athlete by providing field-tested, scientifically validated nutrition and sports performance products. Check them out at wildernessathlete.com and use the JScott promo code to receive 10% off any order. Okay, Heather, in college, while you were rowing like crazy, you were also studying. Can you tell me a little bit of background in what you studied while you were in college?
Yeah, I was really fortunate to be in a school within a school. So Fairhaven was a segment of Western Washington University. And the idea behind Fairhaven was that they wanted you to be able to develop an interdisciplinary study or interdisciplinary concentration. So you were encouraged to actually craft your own curriculum. So I was able to actually put together this whole study based around evolutionary nutrition. So I had classes in nutritional anthropology, all the hard sciences, lots of sustainable agriculture classes, which were really awesome, and then a lot of mindfulness and well-being. And so I graduated with a degree in evolutionary nutrition with a strong emphasis on paleo sports nutrition, because in my years of rowing, I was always searching for the right diet, and I experimented with everything from vegan and raw foods to macrobiotics to the high carb sports nutrition diet that was kind of advocated for my sport. And nothing quite settled with me until I found the paleo diet for athletes. And as I was reading through that book by Lauren Cordain, everything just resonated really well. It was like, yeah, of course we should be eating healthy proteins and high quality meats. Of course we should be eating really delicious, high quality fats and tons of fruits and vegetables. And so that sort of kind of shifted my trajectory into this whole paleo lifestyle and primal movement. And it's been just a huge interest of mine for the last, 6 or 7 years now.
What direct effect have you seen on your own personal body as far as, strength, and, just your body in general when you switched over and the light kind of went off? What has it done for you?
That's a great question. When I was in college, I had kind of the same, I would say, digestive issues that a lot of people experience, whether it's like you can't go to the bathroom or you're going to the bathroom all the time, whatever it is. Sometimes that might fluctuate. But one of the biggest things I noticed is that I went from training 24 hours a week and eating lots of oatmeal and lots of rice and just tons of carbohydrates, everything I could get my hands on, to suddenly only exercising maybe an hour a day, or in my current workout regimen, sometimes it's maybe only 3 days a week. And so I dramatically cut back on the amount of exercise that I was doing. But by shifting to a paleo oriented diet, I actually have more muscle than I did when I was in college. And I'm actually probably quite a bit leaner than I was, because even when you're exercising that much, if your diet isn't healthy or you're really overdoing it on sugars, it's really easy to pack on a pretty substantial amount of weight. So even though my weight, the number that I'm at, has stayed pretty consistent, I've definitely seen some body composition changes that have been for the better. But honestly, for me, the biggest thing I find is not having that digestive upset or that feeling of lethargy after a meal. Because I think for a lot of people, they tend to eat a high carb meal and then afterwards they feel tired or lethargic, or they have an upset stomach, or they feel bloated or distended. And by adopting this sort of paleo diet, I've found that that's just a non-issue. It's really easy to eat a meal and to walk away from it and actually have more energy than when you sat down to the table.
For the listeners out there, Heather, that don't really know what a paleo diet is, can you as simply as possible kind of describe it?
Yeah, without getting into the weeds, I would say the simplest way to think about it is a paleo diet is sort of emulating our hunter-gatherer ancestors. And the argument is that we evolved over millions of years on a diet of foods that you could either hunt or gather or go scrounge up. And it was only in the last 10 to 15,000 years that we shifted to more of an agriculture-based society where people were responsible for raising our food for us, and that's what we ate. So our diet shifted from lots of healthy wild game and seafood, lots of produce and roots and tubers and nuts and seeds, to all of a sudden it was way more focused on grains and beans and dairy and a lot of the, like I mentioned, agriculture based foods. And so when you switch to a paleo diet, you're going back to this nutrition plan that is a lot more nutrient dense. Like we could probably all agree that wild crafted food like fiddlehead ferns are probably more nutritious than cream of wheat. And
Yeah.
so that's kind of the idea, is just shifting back towards more of these wild or uh, let's say non-grain based diets. And it's immediately what you end up doing is cutting back on the amount of carbohydrates you're eating, specifically refined carbohydrates. You're increasing the amount of high quality proteins you're eating and probably dramatically increasing the amount of high quality fats you're having, like omega 3s instead of a lot of omega 6s.
Yeah, it makes total sense. Don't you think, in essence, I heard exactly what you said, but I think as our world has gotten more populated, I think there was probably 50 years ago or 40 years ago where it was, oh my gosh, there's so many people. What are we going to do to feed them all? Oh, this is the cheapest, easiest way to go, when it definitely wasn't the best way to go for our bodies. But don't you think it was more of a function of there's so many mouths to feed, and people are watching their price point, that it made it easy to go to some of the foods that our nation itself has gone to?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm actually reading this book right now called Animal Vegetable Miracle, which is just fantastic. It was written, I think, a good 13 years ago or something. But it's the story of this woman actually deciding to do local food for her family for a year. So they're raising a lot of their own crops. But in the book, she talks a lot about that agenda where, these farmers were being subsidized to grow things like corn and wheat and soy. And people can only eat so much of that. You can only eat
Yeah.
so much bread, or you can only eat so many soybeans. And so out of that, there's basically been a movement towards a lot of food crafted products, whether it's high fructose corn syrup or it's cornstarch or whatever the byproduct may be of all these subsidized products. But you would be hard pressed now to find packaged foods that don't contain wheat, corn, or soy. You just may not recognize it on the label.
Yeah, and can you also, you alluded to it right there, but can you also tell the listeners that maybe have no clue? Because I'd like to put myself in that category of not having much of a clue. Over the last year, I've certainly started listening. My wife eats really clean, and I've started listening. But just go through a list of foods that is just like, in your mind, a human body should not consume.
Ooh, that's a good question. Well,
Just in general, you don't have to be completely specific, but just, a good general.
yeah, I'm pretty diplomatic about it. I think there's foods that obviously there's no need for them. So high fructose corn syrup being one of them. I think that's pretty well accepted. But I think the biggest offender is actually going to be seed oils or industrial seed oils. So that includes canola oil, safflower, sunflower, peanut oil, soy oil. And the reason for that is because these foods are so high in omega 6s that they're exceptionally pro inflammatory. So if you're the person who really struggles with like achy joints, or you don't want to get out of bed in the morning, or you feel like you really struggle to recover from your training sessions, a lot of times that can be directly related to diet and to a pro-inflammatory diet. And we have such a hard time getting in enough omega-3 fats, which are anti-inflammatory, uh, that we tend to, especially if we eat out a lot and we're getting a lot of these industrial seed oils in our food, or our food's being cooked in those fats, we kind of set ourselves up for failure, where it doesn't matter how many omega-3 supplements you take, you're never going to put out that pro-inflammatory fire. So I would say that, if I had to pick the worst food to eat, it'd probably be these really pro-inflammatory fats.
Okay, good stuff. Let's transition. When you were rowing in the Grand Canyon and spending time there, that's where Heather's Choice or the idea of Heather's Choice began. Can you walk me through that process?
Sure. So when I signed up to be a boat captain on this Grand Canyon trip, I was given the menu for, the entire 20 some odd days. And I was flipping through it and was like, man, there's a lot of oatmeal for breakfast. There's sandwiches for lunch every day. Towards the end of the trip, there's Velveeta mac and cheese and canned chicken. Like, I'm not super excited about this menu. And I actually took it upon myself to pack all of my own food for the trip, because I had already dove headfirst into this paleo primal lifestyle. And I was so freaking nervous about this trip as a 23-year-old girl signing up to be a boat captain, that I knew that I wanted to have good food, so I had good energy to be able to row this 3,000-pound boat. And so I ended up getting a food dehydrator and playing around with that for the better part of 3 weeks. And I dehydrated close to 50 pounds of food for this trip and just packed it in a great big dry bag and flew it down to Arizona with me. And that was sort of the beginning of me realizing, wow, dehydrated food's pretty neat, because I can make things like moose jerky, or I can make dehydrated purple sweet potatoes or fruit leathers. And I just had an absolute ball with that. And so since then, I've purchased lots of dehydrators and dehydrated lots of food for my own trips. And eventually it turned into a business.
How long ago did Heather's Choice did you start the business?
We started in August of 2014. And so I had been marinating on the idea for a good 3 or 4 years before we actually went into business.
Gotcha. And tell me how the business has progressed and your product line now from when you started.
Wow. Yeah, it's, I've been kind of relating it recently as riding a freight train since we started our website back in August of 2014. Because I basically had a good friend of mine who almost triple dog dared me to start selling Heather's Choice. He's like, you're super passionate about it. You've got the recipes. The food is awesome. You have requests from customers. What's holding you back? And so I basically was like, well, I need a commercial dehydrator. So I bought this little Cabela's commercial dehydrator for like $900 and started my website, and immediately within the first month was completely sold out and could no longer keep up. So it was definitely a rocky road in the beginning for me of, staying up all hours of the night, chopping carrots and onions, making dark chocolate chili all hours of the day. And it's amazing that I can still eat that stuff because I've made it so many times. But eventually I ended up hooking up with some good friends of mine back in Colorado who run a paleo meal service. And I approached them and said, hey guys, I've got way more business than I can handle. Would you be willing to help me out? And so thankfully, the guys from Caveman Chefs have come on and started acting as a co-packer for me. And since then, we've added an additional kitchen up here in Alaska, Tilgner's Specialized Smoked Seafood Products. And they make all of our dehydrated smoked sockeye salmon chowder and smoked salmon snack packs. And so the business has grown from me dehydrating everything myself on like little itty bitty at home dehydrators to now we reach a nationwide market and we have orders coming in every single day. And granted, we're still trying to keep up.
Sure.
But it's been just absolutely incredible to see the amount of support that we've gotten over the last 2 years. So even though we're a very young business, we even more than quadrupled our sales in the last 3 months.
That's fantastic. I'm sure as you've grown, like most small businesses that are really getting after it, quality control, how do you keep on top of the quality control aspect of your business?
Yeah, it's a great point. So one of the things that we do is we actually have hazard analysis critical control point plans, which I didn't know that was a thing until I started my own food business. But basically, we have really tight parameters on how long the food can be in the dehydrator for, what temperature it needs to be at when it goes in. We actually take water activity at the end to make sure that the food is completely bone dry. So we have all these kind of checks and balances in place so that we make sure that the food is always safe because that's our biggest concern. But other products like our coconut packaroons, we're still refining our process on that simply because something like a cookie is such a subjective experience. If you ever bite into one of our coconut packaroons, one person might be
They're
like,
phenomenal.
yeah, some people love them. Some people absolutely hate them, which I've come to find out that a lot of people don't like coconut, and it breaks my heart every time.
I love them.
Thanks. Me too. And so we're still trying to fine tune that stuff where we really just need someone who's dedicated there all the time, testing and tasting every single batch and, determining, okay, like they've been in the dehydrator long enough, but they're still not quite done. They need to go an hour longer. And so we're really kind of working through those growing pains and seeing how do you run quality control on 4,000 packaroons at a time when we're used to making, a couple hundred.
Sure. Yeah. Let's take a quick break here to hear from our sponsors. Guys, I've known the owners of the Outdoorsmans for over 20 years, and the thing that I like most about the Outdoorsmans is they are hunters and they create all of their products with hunters in mind. I think they are the absolute authority on optics. If you call down there and talk to anyone at the Outdoorsmans and talk about tripods, talk about glassing, talk about optics, spotting scopes, rifle scopes, backpacks, you name it. They're hunters, so they can talk to you one on one and give you firsthand experience on how to use the Outdoorsman's products. I strongly suggest you give them a call at 1 800 291 8065 or go to their website at outdoorsmans.com. They've got a really cool website. It shows a bunch of their products, the optics, the packs, the tripods, the bino accessories, and they carry the greatest line of optics that's available on the market. So make sure you use the J Scott promo code when you call, and you'll get 10% off on all products. And I want to thank the Outdoorsmans for their support. Utah Hydrographics is in the water transfer printing service, and they are open to whatever you can dream up. Choose from a wide range of camo patterns, designs, and colors. Whether it's guns, bows, tools, rifle stocks, vehicles, steering wheels, fenders, dashboards, paint guns, fishing rods, cups, tripods, watches, knife grips, helmets for a local sports team or for your motorcycle, picture frames, mailbox, animal skulls, you name it, they can probably do it. Utah Hydrographics loves taking things that are general looking and turns them into something that looks fantastic and eye-popping. Give them a call and see what they can do for you and receive up to a 10% discount by using the JScott16 promo code. Visit them at utahhydrographics.com or on Instagram at Utah Hydrographics. You know, Heather, one of the things that really impressed me when I got my package, I saw them on the internet there and was a little bit curious as to the size of the pouches and what have you, and the packaging, compared to other backcountry meals, the packaging seems much smaller, but I was surprised with the small packaging how much food was actually in the package.
Yeah, I'm glad you noticed that because I get that question all the time from people who see my business and they're like, wait, why aren't you just doing freeze dried? Because that's typically what you get from Mountain House or Backpackers Pantry or anything else off the shelf. And the reason why I have kind of stuck to my guns with dehydrated food is A, I think it tastes better. B, it's very approachable. So anybody can go buy a dehydrator and dehydrate food at home. And quite frankly, I think everybody should have one because they're so flippin' fun to use. But then also, dehydrated food is quite a bit smaller than freeze dried food because you don't get that kind of puffed consistency. And so we're able to fit, close to 600 calories in a 4-ounce serving, which fits in a little bag, about half the size of a quart-sized Ziploc is about how much space our food takes up when it's dry. So I'm glad you like the packaging now, but you're really going to be impressed with the new bags we're getting this summer.
Oh wow, that's cool because I think these are really good. So that's fantastic to hear that.
Yeah, the buckwheat breakfast fits in a bag that will basically slide into your back pocket, and it's close to 500 calories.
Oh wow, that's fantastic. I tried both the blueberry buckwheat and the banana buckwheat and liked them both. Blueberry was probably my favorite, but banana was just a very close second there. Liked them both. Was very impressed. And then the packaroons. I'm looking at them here. You've got Chinese five spice, spiced cocoa packaroons, sweet coconut, lemon lavender, and black espresso. Just a nice variety. And I was impressed with the packaroons. Tell me a little bit, how that came about.
Sure. So when I was just getting into dehydrating food, I had found a recipe for these coconut macaroons that were all completely raw. And I ended up making those for basically everybody for Christmas one year. And so I've continued to make these little coconut cookies for, like I say, 6 or 7 years now. And the recipe has slowly evolved over time, and I've developed tons of new flavors. The six that we have out now is some of my favorites, but I've got probably 18 different varieties I'd like to release at some point. So it's been fun to see that these little coconut cookies that I started making at home for myself and for my friends have now turned into some of our best sellers for Heather's Choice.
What would you say, out of the six that you have, what would you say your top three, or is it totally subjective?
Nope, orange vanilla packaroons, you're probably never going to be able to get your hands on them because we just can't make enough of them. It's crazy stuff because we put orange essential oils in them and then also Madagascar vanilla bean. And so people buy those like crazy. I personally really like the Chinese five spice, even though it's not our best seller because I think people don't really know what to expect with it. But it's a very awesome kind of savory chocolate flavor. It's super good. And then black espresso is awesome for all of our mountaineering folks who are going out and need a little boost of caffeine while they're out on the trail.
That brings up a good point. Let's talk about the ingredients that you use in both the packaroons and the buckwheat breakfast and the dinner meals. Um, I noticed the ingredients are they're awesome.
They're pretty damn clean. For me, when I was thinking about Heather's Choice, I knew that I wanted a product that was gluten free, dairy free, and soy free. And ideally, I wanted something that was really balanced in carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. Because what I was finding when I was trying to pack for my own trips was that it was really easy to get a lot of sugar. You could get tons of rice or tons of beans or lots of wheat, and it was really hard to get some really good high quality protein, which for folks who don't know, protein is going to be the macronutrient that is the most satiating. So it's actually going to signal to your brain, yes, I have eaten, I am full. Whereas everybody knows the potato chip phenomenon where you can eat 2,000 calories worth of potato chips and still not be full afterwards. And so when I was developing these meals, I was really intentional with picking ingredients that were high in good quality fats, high in protein, and then also moderate in carbohydrates. So for example, the buckwheat breakfast, it's mostly going to be fat calories that you get from that because you want those fats to really stay with you when you have long days out in the backcountry.
Yeah, I loved both of the breakfasts, both the banana and the blueberry were fantastic for sure. Um, What makes Heather's Choice in your mind better than the competition?
It's totally different. That's one thing, like I mentioned earlier, the fact that we have a dehydrated versus a freeze dried product, it makes our food just very, very different because a lot of people have this experience with freeze dried meals where they're left at the end of it feeling potentially bloated or they feel like they just ate,
And so much
salt.
salt too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They feel like they just ate a cup of salt. And that's kind of the flavor experience that they get is, wow, this is salty or wow, this
Yeah.
is sweet. So I feel like our stuff is very different because all of these recipes are things that I would make at home. Like the most recent meal that we uh, have released on our adventure menu is our Ethiopian Dorowat. And this is a meal that I had experimented with home, making it in a Dutch oven and then dehydrated the leftovers. And we took that with us on a pack rafting trip in Utah. And after a 24-mile day, we sat down to eat this leftover Dorowat. And I swear to you, it was the best meal I'd ever had in my life. So,
And that's Texas quail, right?
yep, exactly. So I think that's what makes this business so fun is that I'm able to literally take recipes from home. If you were a guest and I was having you over for dinner, I'd probably make dark chocolate chili or Ethiopian Dorowat for you and serve it, at the dinner table.
Yeah, no, I've been impressed with the way these meals taste. Really good taste. The smoked sockeye salmon chowder, the tomatillo rancheros, the chipotle cherry chili. What's your best seller or what's your most popular out of those meals?
Ooh, the smoked sockeye salmon chowder for sure. Because that has been, it's by far my favorite meal of the whole lineup. I will pick that one every time we're headed out into the backcountry. And it's such a unique story behind it because initially when I developed the recipe, it didn't have smoked salmon. It was just dehydrated sockeye. But then I was introduced to this gentleman named Art Tilgner, who I mentioned earlier runs that seafood processing plant down in Ninilchik. And Art is 80 years old and sharp as a tack and such an incredible gentleman. He's just, I can't say enough good things about him and his family. His wife Joanne's a sweetheart. His son Chris is awesome. And when I met Art, I got to taste his smoked salmon, and it is absolutely the best smoked fish I've ever had. And so we formed this really cool partnership because he buys about 5 to 10,000 pounds of salmon every summer and then spends all winter smoking it and turning it into his cold smoked lox. But on every fillet, he can only use about 75% of it for lox, and then there's 25% of the fillet that doesn't get cut. And it ends up being scrap, and he's been trying to find an outlet for it. So we developed this partnership, and I said, hey, Art, cut up those pieces of smoked salmon for me and dehydrate them, and we'll incorporate them into the smoked salmon chowder. And it just dramatically improved the recipe, and like I say, has ended up being our absolute best seller.
That's a great story. I love that. Last week when I had some listeners that said, "Jay, you've got to get Heather on the podcast," and that's what led me to you. And you were actually salmon fishing on the Copper River.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
So up here in Alaska, I don't know if it's this way in other places, but we have this awesome opportunity to go and do a little bit of subsistence fishing. So for every head of household, you can head up to the Copper River or down to the Kenai and get 25 salmon and then an additional 10 salmon for every person in your family. So you can imagine there are really big families with 10 kids that will head up there, and take 125 fish home or whatever. So my boyfriend Brad and I headed up for the opener on June 7th, and we took a week off of work knowing, okay, if the salmon aren't running the day we get there, we need to be able to stay until we hit our limit. So we went up there, and the first day got totally skunked and only pulled about 7 fish out at like 9 o'clock at night. So the next morning we caught a boat downriver, got dropped off at about 5 o'clock in the morning, and by 9:30 we had gotten our limit and we were out of there. So it was a pretty awesome experience to be able to take these big nets, anywhere from 3 to 5 feet in diameter, and you literally set them down in an eddy in this really silty water. And sure as shit, the fish come swimming upstream and swim into your net, and you haul them out of the water, and it is a flippin' riot. It is so much fun. But as
Like roughly how many pounds? Like
these
how big are they?
these are fairly small sockeye salmon, so they're maybe in like the 7 to 10 pound range, I would say. Maybe even like smaller than that, depending on the fish. And you can imagine that heading and gutting and filleting 35
Oh,
fish was a project, but our freezer is about a third of the way full for the winter.
that's fantastic. And not to mention, once they get in the net, it's a wrestling match, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, it's like I say, it is so much flippin' fun. We're actually hoping to go again down on the Kenai this summer because now that we have 70 fillets, we're eating it like every other night.
Good for you. Good for you. I'd like to give you a chance to give some advice to our listeners as far as dehydrating food. And obviously, you're a pro at it. And obviously, you have these phenomenal backcountry meals, which I'm going to give you a chance for everybody to be able to go on Heather's Choice and, check all your stuff out. But what are some tips when you first got your dehydrator? Maybe a couple things that you learned that maybe those out there that are listening, if they get dehydrators, that they could learn from mistakes maybe that you made already.
Yeah, because I've made them all, I'm sure. I think what's so fun about dehydrating food is that you don't let food go to waste. So, for example, there's a community supported agriculture group here in Anchorage where they get tons of produce and then distribute it to people's homes. But at the end of the week, there may be tons of food that just didn't get distributed to people or it's left over or whatever. And you can turn that stuff into awesome dehydrated snacks for your backcountry trips. So last night I made a coconut carrot soup that was pureed that you could easily just pour onto food dehydrator trays, kind of like a fruit leather. And then once it's completely dry, you can put it back in the blender and break it up until it's powdered. So then when you're in the backcountry, you just add hot water to that and you have a nice hot pureed soup. And then this morning I made pear sauce, so just like applesauce, but with pears instead, because we had like 30 of them that we needed to process. And so same sort of deal. If you can make that into a pear fruit leather, or you can make it into a pear sauce again if you add hot water to it. So I would say that anybody who wants to get into dehydrating food, definitely get maybe an Excalibur dehydrator or a Nesco Food Saver or Harvest Saver. You can find those online at Amazon. And then get the fruit leather sheets. And when you use those, you just want to give them a quick spray of maybe coconut oil or something, some sort of fat like that, so that your food doesn't stick to the fruit leather trays. And then have a blast playing around just making fruit leathers in the beginning, because everybody likes fruit leathers. Everybody will
Yeah.
eat them. And you may find that you have leftover bananas or cherries that are about to go bad, or maybe some nectarines that are a little too ripe. And just blending that stuff up and pouring it on the dehydrator trays, you can make your own fruit leathers overnight. And I just think that that's so neat. It's just too much fun
Yeah.
to play with food.
Those are great tips. Thank you for that. And also, I'd like to ask you, as much training as you've had in nutrition, for those listening that maybe this is the first time they've heard any of this stuff, as far as just dieting for people out there and trying to, lose weight, what are like 3 steps that you would say if you follow these, by changing your diet, these 3 steps, this will help most people?
Yeah, that's a great one. I can't recommend the Primal Blueprint enough. So Mark Sisson is kind of my nutrition guru. He's one of many, but that guy is so freaking smart. And if you hop on marksdailyapple.com and buy his book or read his blog posts, you'll forever be entertained. The second thing, and you'll learn about this in the Primal Blueprint, is really to be cognizant of your carbohydrate intake. So whether you use a nutrition tracker or you're just kind of, eyeballing it, just being aware of how much sugar you eat every single day, whether it's from bread or it's from potatoes or lattes or whatever it may be. That's a really big stumbling block for people, is they're simply just taking in too much sugar and they don't even know it. And then the last thing I would say is make sure you're eating enough good quality meat. It's really impossible to regulate our appetite if we're not getting enough protein. So making sure you start your day with a protein-rich breakfast, have a good portion of protein with lunch, and same thing with dinner. And that will immediately improve your appetite regulation. So I would put money on all three of those.
What protein? Give me some examples of the best sources of protein that you eat.
Definitely salmon. So that's a big one. Last night we had halibut. So we're really fortunate to have so much good seafood up here. We have backyard chickens. So we eat 2 to 3 eggs per person every single day. And then finally, we get a lot of moose meat, but any sort of red meat, whether it's bison or beef, all of it needs to be grass fed or wild. Uh,
Deer, elk, that kind of stuff.
Exactly. So that sort of stuff is the healthiest food on the planet. And so, fortunately for people who are going out and hunting, they just need to be eating the food out of their own freezer.
Yeah, for sure. One question that I just thought of, if you're able to eat fresh fish, because I know a lot of times people struggle when, and I know I do when I go out to eat, and you were talking about the different oils that food gets cooked in. If you do go out to eat, and let's say you're going to have some fish cooked, do you ask specifically what kind of oil that fish is, grilled in or is put on the fish, and what kind of oil do you recommend and that you consider is safe?
That's a great question. I don't tend to ask as far as like what oils my food is cooked in at a restaurant, because 98% of the time it's going to be vegetable oils and it's going to be really hard to get around that. So ordering your stuff grilled rather than uh, baked or fried is going to be a good option, since there's probably not a lot of oils actually on the grill grate. But then if you are going to have something that's cooked in a pan, I'm actually always going to choose butter as my fat of choice, which
Okay.
people always are really surprised by that. But if you can get yourself some really good grass-fed butter, like a Kerrygold from Costco or something like that, that's going to be one of the healthiest fats you can have, because you don't want to spend a lot of time cooking with olive oil, even though it's really healthy. It's not very heat stable. It's actually very heat sensitive, and so it can go rancid fairly quickly. So rather than cooking with something like olive oil, you're better off reaching for a grass-fed butter or an avocado oil or coconut oil.
Good stuff. Okay, that's great tips there. Well, we covered a lot of ground today. I really appreciate you being on with us. Do you have any concluding thoughts, or sounds like you're getting towed?
Yeah, thankfully I'm not. Like I say, I'm trying to find a place with good cell service, but parking lots aren't really doing it.
No
Um,
sweat.
any other good tips for people? You know,
Yeah, or just any concluding thoughts? Tell me about heatherschoice.com, how people can find you on your social media platforms and what have you.
Yeah, absolutely. So definitely encourage people to head over to heatherschoice.com and take a peek at our adventure menu. We have currently 6 flavors of our coconut packaroons, 6 buckwheat breakfasts, and 6 entrees. And my ultimate goal with Heather's Choice is to actually have a full day's worth of calories for somebody. So all their hot drinks, their breakfast, snacks, dinners, desserts, all of that. So definitely keep your eyes peeled for new offerings on the website. And then you can find us at Heather's Choice on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, and YouTube. We're kind of all over the place, but I try to post as many adventure photos as I can on our Instagram. And more than anything, I love hearing from our customers and hearing what you guys are up to and where you're headed on your trips.
Yeah, that's one of the things that not only super high quality products, but I love the story behind your business and quite honestly the story of you. And I want to wish you the best of success and really appreciate you coming on and sharing your knowledge with us. And really enjoyed getting my sampler pack and trying all these different meals. And there's a few of them that I still have to try, but the ones that I did try I really, really liked. And the packaroons are fantastic little treats and going to be great for my hunts upcoming. So just want to thank you for coming on and spending time with us, and enjoy that Alaskan summer, okay?
Yeah, thank you so much. Enjoy Colorado.
All right, sounds good. Well, thanks for sharing your time.
Take care.
All right, bye. Guys, thanks for listening to this podcast. I think Heather did a great job. I want to encourage you guys to subscribe. Hit the subscribe button on iTunes or on Podbean or on Stitcher and subscribe to this podcast. Also, I'm going to ask all you listeners if you would, please go on iTunes, give us a positive review on iTunes, and give us a 5-star rating. That helps our placement on iTunes. And without you guys' support, this podcast wouldn't have the traction that it does. And I just thank each and every one of you for your support. And God bless you till the next episode.